Skylar Cunningham of Lean Frontiers, and I will serve as your host today. You can see on the screen Andy Carlino, who will be presenting to us today on Factory 4.0 for the new normal. An internationally recognized advisor, educator, and speaker, Andy Carlino has over 20 years experience in real-world senior management, including president and COO, and is a member of the several boards and advisory committees. Over the past 30 years, he has worked and consulted in virtually every sector of industry, from shipbuilding to potato chips to emergency rooms. He is comfortable and accepted in the boardroom as he is in the shop floor. He was the co-founder of the Lean Learning Center nearly 20 years ago. In addition to many publications, blogs, and videos, he co-authored the very successful book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to Lean, and was contributing author to SME's Lean Handbook. I will hand it over to Andy.
Thank you, Skylar. So just to get started, I would like to ask a favor of those of you who are watching this video. Hopefully you're going to learn significantly from the video, but I also like to take the advantage of learning from being with you as well. So take some notes and jot down some questions or comments that you'd like to offer. And I would suggest that you kind of pass those on to Skylar at Lean Frontiers, and she'll gladly pass them on to me through your notes and comments, and whether you agree or disagree, or you just want to add some more information, I'll have an opportunity to learn more as well. So let's hopefully make this a mutual learning experience. Now, I'm not going to tell you, in fact, I'm going to make it clear, I am not an Industry 4.0 expert. I am not a digital expert. In fact, this is not going to be a commercial for digital. I am, however, I guess what would be considered a lean expert, but this is not going to be a commercial for lean as well. This is going to be a commercial for learning. This is going to be a commercial, if you would, for gaining new knowledge. The common theme you will hear through the time we're together is going to be lean and digital, but the common thread is going to be about learning and gaining new knowledge. So if you have some expectation that you're going to learn about AI or the Internet of Things or adaptive manufacturing, big data, et cetera, I'm sorry to disappoint you. There will be some references, but this time we're together is really not about those digital tools or techniques. So I'd like to start and I'm going to do some screen sharing here by going to slide number 2 of the slide deck. Which is about the new normal. Now, I don't know how old you all are in the audience, but I'm an old dude, so I can remember back in the good old days when, with Joel Barker, and all we heard was the word paradigm. Paradigm, 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 paradigm. You couldn't hear a presentation, you couldn't read an article, you couldn't read a book without finding paradigms somewhere in the conversation. So we came a little bit tired of hearing, paradigm, paradigm. Well, we got a new set of buzzwords, or 2 words at least, and that's new normal. If you haven't heard it, you probably will. I mean, it is probably in every presentation, it is in every video, it's in practically everybody's discussion, regardless of whether you're in manufacturing, healthcare, retail, education, doesn't make any difference. The pandemic has caused us to talk new normal, and new normal. And I don't know about you, but I'm suffering a little bit from what I'm going to call, for the lack of a better term, new normal fatigue. I'm just simply tired of hearing about it. Now, I'm probably tired of hearing about it because it's just so repetitive. I would think that's probably the primary reason. But I think maybe the other reason myself and others are a little bit tired of hearing about it is the fear associated with it. The fear associated with not knowing what we don't know. Maybe fear is a strong word, but when you think about the pandemic, when you think about COVID, it's not so much that COVID scares us, it's what we do and don't know about COVID. More than we don't know about COVID that scares us. So I think that's the issue with new normal as well. I think it's what we don't know that really scares us. So if you look at our current state of knowledge, we only know from history. We only know from what we have learned in the past. We have to develop new knowledge. We have to get better at learning, and then using that learning to determine where are we going to go from here. Without that new knowledge, you'll just be depending on current knowledge to try to come up with something new. And that in itself just doesn't make sense. So if we're going to change our thinking, then we've got to get this new knowledge. If we're going to change or adapt our strategy, we need this new knowledge. And we're going to have to do it pretty quickly, because no matter how much new knowledge you develop, it can be quickly disrupted. Just think about the election that's coming up in just another 8 days. How quickly that could disrupt what we think our new normal might be. So for a moment, let me just introduce to you, if you would, the other reason why I want to speak to you today. The first reason is certainly I'm probably suffering from new normal fatigue and maybe the same fear that you are all suffering from. The second reason I wanted to be with you today is that recently I had a chance to watch a webinar by an individual named Steven Spear. Many of you may know Steven. In fact, if you don't, I suggest you get to know him and follow everything and anything that he does. Steven Spear did a webinar called Discovering Your Way to the New Normal. And that really stimulated me, beyond the fact of the repetition or the fear of the new normal. This webinar by Steve of Discovering Your New Normal really helped me condense my thinking into what I'm going to call this kind of 4 major observations at this point in time. And again, let me go back to when I started. You can disagree with these observations and conclusions. You can agree with them. You may have additional ones that you want to add. I am fine with all of that, and I want you to share that with me. That's how I'm going to learn as well. These are my observations based on my experiences and based on what I'm hearing as well in the marketplace. So some of my beginning observations simply are, as I said, we fear the new normal because we just simply don't know what we don't know. The pandemic is an excellent example of that. Second observation is, you will never think your way to the new normal. If you can sit around and think that you can sit in a room and figure out what that new normal looks like, you live in fantasy land. That's just not where it's going to be. You are going to have to learn. You're going to have to discover what that new normal is. You'll never think your way to the new normal. It's much like all of innovation. Innovation isn't about sitting in a room and thinking up whatever that new idea might be. It might be understanding where we currently are and then doing a set of what ifs and then innovating from that. So if you think you'll think your way to the new normal, again, you live in fantasy land. As in bullet number 3, you are going to have to discover that new normal. You just don't know what you don't know. And what you do know today is simply not going to be enough. And then lastly, how's the best way to discover that new normal? It's going to be through experiments. Whether they're failed experiments or successful experiments, you will learn by experimentation. So if you would, these aren't 4 disconnected bullet points. These are 4 very connected bullet points. Basically, we kind of fear what we don't know. You're not going to effectively get to that new normal by just thinking what that might be and what you might do. You're going to have to discover what you need to do in that new normal. And lastly, you're going to discover through a series of failed or successful experiments. That's how you get new knowledge. So that was kind of the original observations, if you would, that I wanted to make to kind of get us started. So I'm convinced, and I'm sure you're convinced as well, that Industry 4.0 offers opportunities to address the new normal. I don't know specifically what those opportunities are, and I don't know specifically how you're going to address them in the digital world. But it's relatively clear and doesn't take a genius to figure out the opportunities are there. Let's just face it. The digital economy is real. It is here. It is happening today. Every company, almost every company, has already undergone some kind of radical shift to a virtual operation. And even the most reluctant companies have had no choice but to venture becoming more technologically enabled. That's just the way it is today. So a recent, and sorry if I have to look here for my statistics, a recent Industry Week survey indicated that 89% of the respondents believe they have been or will be negatively impacted by the pandemic, by COVID. However, 97% of those respondents also indicated they think it creates opportunities. So that's a kind of interesting dichotomy there. The pandemic is really killing us, and we don't know what the new normal is, but we do know the new normal is probably going to offer us a whole bunch of opportunities. So from healthcare to manufacturing to food processing to whatever industry that you want to choose, they are all technologically advancing as fast as they possibly can. So my experience with working with some companies, and again, not as a technical expertise, but with the technical expertise, but with a strategic expertise, is that there probably are 3 variations, if you would, to the strategies you might use going forward in the new normal. Now, these are 3 strategies where there's probably some variation between any one of them. So I'm not suggesting to you that these are the only 3 strategies. I just want you to use this as thought-provoking about what your strategy will be. And as we go on further, I'll explain how maybe the conditions that you are currently in may impact and affect your strategy going forward. So what I want to do is kind of review with you very, very quickly these 3 strategies. Excuse me a minute, I'm not the best at this, so I've got to go back to my screen share and get this right. So the 3 strategies are do more and do it faster. Okay, and the second strategy is steady as you go. Basically, look, we're doing a good job. Let's keep at the current approach and at the current pace. And then that third strategy is purpose first. So these are generally the 3 strategies that I believe need to be considered as you move forward with your Factory 4.0, Industry 4.0 initiative toward the new normal. Now, again, there's some variation, there's some gray in between all of these, but essentially, these are the 3 strategies that I want to address. So one of the things that we did was, or I did, is I joined in, with my partner, my ex-partner, Jamie Flinchborough. If you don't know Jamie, you need to follow him just like you follow Stephen Spear. And we developed a survey. And in that survey, we had 18 questions. And in those 18 questions, we asked anything from why to how when it came to digital and the new normal. And it was enlightening to see some of those answers. And I'm not going to go through all 18 questions and go through a whole set of survey responses. That would be terribly boring. But I do want to at least go through what I find to be interesting and what I find to be key observations going forward. So what has happened here is that 90-some, I'm going to look at my numbers again. It was interesting to find that about 92% of the respondents indicated that the digital transformation is absolutely critical to their business, or it's absolutely necessary. At the same time, a staggering 53% of them said they will be increasing their digital budget either now or into 2021. So I think those 2 factors in themselves say a lot. When you have that many people indicating that they are going to be increasing their budget, when you have that many companies saying that we believe this to be critical or absolutely necessary, then that simply means we have to have a strategy to address what's critical, and now that we have a budget, being able to enable what's critical, what we need to do to address the critical. Interesting enough as well was that about 32% of the respondents indicated that they are either behind their competition or on par with their competition. 32% are behind, 24% they believe they're on par with their competition. And then there's a group of people that believe they are ahead of their competition. So let me make a point here. There are three strategies that we talked about. The first one is steady as she goes. Okay. The second strategy is more faster. The third strategy is purpose. Figure out what you want to do and then come up with a tool or technique to do that. If you are on par with your competition, or if you believe you are ahead of your competition, then the likelihood of steady as she goes will probably be your number one strategy. If you are behind your competition, then you may be in the more and faster strategy, or the better strategy, I believe, which is purpose first, tools second. Have a purposeful strategy for your digital implementation. So our approach is going to be significantly dictated by the conditions that you find yourself in. So I don't know where you fall on the spectrum. That's for you to determine. That's for you to find out. But based on these responses, it would suggest that if you believe it's critical and necessary, and if you have the budget for it, then probably doing more faster or steady as she goes will likely be the strategy that you will choose. I'm not saying these are good or bad. This is just likely where you might go at the end of the day with your strategy. So the next slide I'm going to share with you is some additional information as well. And this is about the priorities, more about where do companies see themselves as far as digital and priority it plays in the company. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of a problem here, and that's my fault. But I promise you I will get there. Here we go. So, no, there we don't go. All right, let me just explain it without the slide so that I don't bore you any further. Although I do think the slide is relevant. So I'm going to fight it one more time. All right. So what does this all mean, this particular slide? Well, 32% of the respondents indicated that digital is a high priority, but it also showed that 47 of the respondents said that it's competing with other priorities. So you have digital as an extremely high priority, but you also have the case where it's contributing with other priorities in the organization. They also indicated that 66.6%, or 2/3 of the barriers that they expect or currently have to actually implementing this digital strategy falls within basically three categories: culture, budget, and priority itself. So if this is the case, if this is where you are right now, then I would suggest that purpose first is the strategy that would make sense. The purpose first strategy is the value added strategy. If you have a culture, all right, or a budget or priorities that are barriers to you implementing digital, and digital is a competing priority in your organization, then you must go for purpose first, the value added approach. If you don't, all right, your employees will just not recognize the value of what you're trying to do. And basically, at the end of the day, and some of you may have heard me say this before, we do not do what we don't value. So this is about building the value. But you have to do this at a granular level. You have to kind of dig deeper. You can't just build value by saying, oh, we're going to be more competitive, or no, we're going to be in the top quartile in our industry. That really doesn't build value. It's a nice goal, it's a nice objective, but really your employees, your organization can't relate to that. What they can relate to is getting down deeper and figuring out what are the problems that you're trying to address. What are the issues that you're trying to address? What are the challenges that you're facing? So maybe artificial intelligence, AI, and a chatbot is a solution for the fact that you have multilingual global operations and you need to put training together to support that. Maybe you have a returning workforce that is unskilled or less skilled, and there's going to be more difficulty. So maybe Google Glass and standard work instructions in Google Glass is an answer. I don't know what the problem is. I don't know what challenge you're trying to meet. I don't know what issue you're trying to overcome. But this, if you go here, if you go to looking toward what your problems are, your issues are, your challenges are, and then how can I solve those with a digital application, now you have developed some real purpose. Now you can start getting rid of or helping get rid of those barriers, the cultural barriers that are opposed to kind of the new world, if you would. The budget barriers that would suggest, you know what, there isn't the return on the investment. Or the priority barriers that would suggest, really there are other priorities that we need to address that are ahead of this, but when you show that value, you'll find that maybe nothing's of a higher priority than this at the moment. So if you look at the three strategies, do the same, steady as she goes. Second strategy, more and faster. And the third strategy, purposeful, purpose first, tool second. Then when you fall into this particular category of competing priorities and significant barriers to your transformation, then you really need to be in the purpose first strategy. I just simply don't know how you'll get out of that. So, talking a little bit further about this. If your strategy, if your digital strategy is steady as she goes, you've determined that to be the case, or that's been the case now for whatever it might be. That would suggest that you've been successful, that you've probably been successful with your digital strategy, and you don't deem COVID to really be that big a disruptor. If that's the case, you're good to go. However, if neither one of those are the case, if you haven't been terribly successful, and however you define success, or if COVID is going to be a disruptor, then steady as she goes is probably not going to be the best strategy. Now, if your strategy is more and faster, or is purposeful, then that's where, as I just said a few minutes ago, you need to get out there and start defining the problems. You need to determine what the challenges are, what pressures the organization is under. You're going to have to define those quite clearly and quite specifically. They can't be generic definitions or kind of generic or abstract problems. They have to be very specifically defined so you can come up with very specific solutions. So define the problem or the challenge, establish your let me back up. How do you do that then? How do I learn? How do I use the purposeful approach to learn and gain new knowledge so that what I do will be effective in moving me toward eliminating my problems and meeting my challenges? The answer to that is scientific experimentation. It's that simple. You need to experiment. Define the problem, the need, or the challenge, establish your hypothesis, execute rapid and low-cost experiments, learn from those, whether they're successes or failures, and based on that learning, either experiment again or go into some form of implementation. But you'll only experiment your way to new knowledge. You'll never think your way to new knowledge. So again, if your strategy is move more and faster, or if it's purposeful, you're going to have to get into scientific experimentation. Let me give you some examples. That some of you know I'm a storyteller. So I've had the opportunity over the years to work with AGCO, the Agricultural Equipment Company. And they got quite enamored with Google Glass some years ago. And frankly, at the time, Google Glass probably had lost some of its luster, some of its excitement. But the AGCO was somewhat persistent in deeming that at that time, they think there would be an application. So we started having more discussions about what the problems were in the organization. One of the single biggest problems was the fact that they are very much market-driven and seasonal-driven, and that impacts their workforce. The workforce is in and out, and in addition to that, they've now added mixed model lines. So in order to have someone be able to effectively complete an operation in a 15-minute takt time with a mixed model line and a relatively inexperienced employee is not going to be the simplest task to overcome, the simplest problem to solve. So the idea was that maybe Google Glass could do that. Well, at the time, it wasn't Google Safety Glass. So obviously that was the first impediment. That was the first thing that was in the way. So how do we figure out how to get Google Safety Glass? And to ADCO's credit, they partnered with others and they figured that out. Once that was figured out, it was just pretty simple. It was just, okay, let's get all those standard work instructions. Let's get videos and checklists in place. Like get them on Google Glass and let the individuals visualize the work that they have to do, regardless of what the model is. And then they could check off, if you would, do the little checklist. It was very easy to just tap the side of the glasses and check off the work that they did. That would then be recorded into the quality management system. So it was extremely effective, worked very well. But interestingly enough, I was asked about a problem that they had. Their problem was that their voice recognition system wasn't working well at final inspection. So they weren't really getting an accurate description to the best of their ability of what the defect was in final inspection. So they were working on how could they improve the audio portion of the Google Glass, the voice recognition. Well, again, through further discussion, we got down to what the real problem is. The real problem wasn't voice recognition. The real problem was they couldn't accurately and effectively document defects and at inspection. It was kind of that simple. Google Glass might have been helpful, and obviously the ability to, with audio, to explain what the defect is would have been helpful, but we weren't able to do that. So what did we do? We just simply said the problem is not Google Glass in the audio. The problem is you cannot currently at final inspection understand what the defect is at that point of time, and then compile that data, real-time data, and then be able to react to that. So what do? We just simply put a menu on Google Glass. 80% of the defects could be put on a very simple menu. And all they would do again is just hit the side of the glass. That was the defect that they had found. That defect would go into the system. The system would then compile those defects, sort those defects, and depending on severity, depending on number of defects, determine the amount of response that would be required. So here we had a situation where we had a very effective digital tool, but didn't know how to use it. So we backed up and figured out what the problem was, and was Google Glass a solution to that problem? If it wasn't, and we could test it, and we did test it very quickly, if it wasn't, then we would have learned something and we would have tried something else. So that's just one example. Another example I like to come up with is not too long ago, as many of you recall, we were all talking about and-on systems in Toyota, right? You go into Toyota, you pull a cord. When you pull a cord, that's a signal that there's a problem. Someone's going to respond because you pulled the cord and the music went off and you have a first responder. The responder doesn't show up, then the line is going to stop because we're not going to work around problems. We're going to surface them and do something about them. Very, very healthy purpose. But walk into a hospital and suggest to them that, you know what, you need to put a cord up. And as the nurses walk down the corridor, they need to pull that cord to alert, a responder, to alert that they have surfaced a problem. Well, that I would get laughed at and have been laughed at for even thinking about something like that. But if you think about what the purpose is, the purpose being surface problems at the point of activity, get someone to respond immediately to those problems. If they don't respond immediately, stop, all right, until you get a response to those problems. Document, compile, document, and sort those problems, that data, and then put improvements in place to assure they don't occur again. If you couch it from that perspective, if you couch it from that purpose, then yeah, hanging a cord in a hospital corridor doesn't make any sense, but there are other tools and techniques that could solve exactly the same thing. There are digital applications like C2Solve, where a nurse, and this is happening today, where a nurse will go in, she will see a problem. She will pick that problem off a menu of problems. That will immediately go to a first responder. Should that the appropriate first responder, by the way, for that particular problem, if that first responder does not respond, then that problem will get escalated, right? And then it will get escalated so that that nurse will get support to either deal with that problem at the moment or move on and document the problem and work on it, down the road. So it's a very, very simple digital application to do exactly the same thing as pulling the cord on the manufacturing line in Toyota. You know how many times I have worked with automotive companies who tried to just simply copy their Toyota model without understanding the thinking or the purpose that went behind the tools and techniques that they were using. This is no different. This digital world going forward in the new normal is no different than where we were 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago with Lean. With Lean, we just marched out a bunch of tools and away we went. We just started applying the tools, had no idea why we were applying them. Yeah, we were getting some results, but really didn't understand the thinking behind that. Fortunately, over the last 15, 20 years, that's changed significantly. I think as we look at Lean today, we don't think tools first, we think purpose first. Why not would we not be doing the exact same thing with the digital tools and techniques we have available to us today? Purpose first, tools second. So regardless of the challenges you have, regardless of the problems or issues you have, you need to be purposeful in addressing those. And if being purposeful will get you some new knowledge and point you in the direction, if you would, of the right tool and technique to help solve that problem or meet that challenge. Adding to all of this is the fact that you all are going to try to predict what's going to happen in the future. So it's nice to be purposeful because you're going to be working on your problems and your challenges, but you're going to try to also predict what's going to happen. Well, you're not going to be able to predict, and it's like voodoo, it's like a weather forecast. You're going to predict based on history. You're going to predict based on past knowledge and current knowledge. If you're going to try to predict what the new normal is, then that means you may need to gather a lot more data. Maybe big data is someplace that you have to go. Maybe you need to experiment, even if it's manually, experiment with what data would someone need at what point to make a decision. How do I effectively help individuals make good decisions at the point of activity at the right time? What is the information that they need? Not too much, it has to be enough. So you're not going to predict without knowing what that information is and learning from that data, that information that you get back. With getting that information, with having that big data, if you would, or having data, you'll be able to make decisions very quickly, but not just very quickly, but quickly at the point of activity. So I can't stress upon you enough how important that might be. So those some of the conclusions at the end, but I have a few more words I'd like to share with you. First, regardless if your digital transformation is a standalone transformation or it's integrated into other operations, maybe it's part of IT, maybe it's part of operations, it's partnering with another part of your organization. Regardless, you should have a lean practitioner as a partner with your digital practitioner. You need that lean mindset that helps you understand how do you surface and solve problems. Needs you to push you toward recognizing what the current state is, what the facts are today, not what opinions and stories might be influencing your direction. You need to understand how scientific experimentation is so important to learning and gaining new knowledge. So it's important that you have the the lean practitioner partnering with whomever part of your organization is responsible for your digital transformation. So please don't forget that at all. Now, compounding all of this is going to be the rapid pace of change, how quickly things will change for you, quickly things are going to change around you. So just when you think you got it, just when you think you've gained some new knowledge and you think you're kind of almost there, something's going to happen and it's going to require you to kind of go through this effort all over again. So when I was kind of preparing this presentation, I kind of got into thinking about what if, and I was really thinking about what if my personal perspective, what if from a consulting perspective, what if I never get on a plane again? What if my customers don't ever want to see me again? What if I can't keep up with the pace, of change as rapidly as changing? These are a variety of what ifs that I started to ask myself. And as I was thinking about it, I was thinking, well, companies should be asking the what ifs. They should be asking the what ifs at a strategic level. Yeah, we ask the what ifs at a detail level. I mean, basically scientific experimentation is nothing but what if. What if I take this route to work? Will I get there sooner? I take that route to work. I don't get there sooner. My hypothesis, my what if was inaccurate. All right, I'll do another one. But that's at a very detailed level. I believe we should be doing what ifs at a strategic level as well. And I'm not talking about getting into your X matrix and policy deployment. That's really important stuff, and you need to be doing that. But I've been engaged in policy deployment with major corporations, Fortune 100 and 500 companies. Never really hear them ask the difficult question, what if? What if? They're almost always establishing that future, those goals and objectives, what they want to look like in a 1 to year 5 window, without really discussing the what if. And my perfect example is I sit on the board of a manufacturing company that is dramatically impacted. Their market is dramatically impacted by who is in office, Democrats or Republicans. Who controls the White House? Shocking as it may sound, it has a dramatic impact on their particular market. Now, I hope that isn't the case for you. I hope there's, it's probably something different that's as dramatic. So we're doing all kinds of what ifs. As board members, we're sitting there saying, what if we have this Republican administration? What if we have this Democratic administration? And we're going through those exercises probably, I can't say how often, but pretty routinely. And then all of a sudden, those what ifs went out the window because the whole cultural climate, forget Democrat or Republican, the whole cultural climate changed. So our what ifs did not become dependent on the administration that was in place. Our what ifs became dependent upon the cultural climate, the climate that we had in the country today. So even our what if scenarios changed almost overnight. So I do think you need to routinely do the what ifs at a strategy level. All right. We need to think big, but we need to focus small. That just made sense to you. Think big, what if? Focus small on gaining that new knowledge. Now, I'm sure many of the things that I've said you can challenge. You may agree, you may disagree. You may think I'm completely in left field. You know what? That's fine. I'm okay with it. I'm here to get you thinking. That's all. Yeah, I'm here to get you thinking about what are you going to do to gain some new knowledge, assuming that you need to do that. Again, if you're ahead of your competition or maybe on par with your competition, then more and faster, steady as we go might be perfect. But if you're behind your competition, you haven't been as successful as you would like to be, or you understand that the digital transformation is critical to your business going forward, then you need to take a purposeful approach. All I want you to do is start thinking about what is your strategy? What is your strategy going to be? Peggy Gulick from ADCO spoke at an AME conference. Peggy now heads up the global digital transformation for ADCO all over the world. And she was speaking recently at an AME conference, and she challenged the audience to what their single biggest barrier was to moving forward with the digital transformation. And the majority of the responses were there was no cohesive digital strategy. So all I'm asking you to do is think about, what is your digital strategy? Is it steady as she goes? Is it more and faster? Or is it purposeful? Each of those strategies will require you to do something a little bit different. Purposeful is going to require you to do things a lot different. We've got to get out of this proof of concept and get into proof of experiment. We've got to get out of this, let's have another pilot, all right, and have another experiment. If you're just going to focus on proof of concept and having another pilot, you're going to just deplete your resources, and you're going to deplete your resources rapidly. So I favor, obviously, purposeful, but your business conditions, your resources, your marketplace, there are a variety of things that will impact your strategy. So I would be arrogant to suggest any strategy to any one of you. But I am not arrogant to suggest that you need to be thinking about very, very hard about what that strategy is. And even if your strategy is steady as she goes, sit down and maybe think about rethinking that, if that just made sense. So again, in summary, you're not going to think your way to the new normal, right? You're just not going to do that. You're going to have to discover your way to the new normal. The best way to discover your way to the new normal is not going to be proof of concept or pilots. The quickest and least expensive way is going to have scientific experiments, try some stuff, fail, try again. Do it low, no cost to the best of your ability. And again, failure or successes is just an opportunity to learn. And steady as you go isn't bad, and faster and more isn't bad. It's just dependent on your business conditions, market conditions, and where you are currently against your competition. Hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully, as I said in the very beginning of this particular presentation, and let me apologize for my difficulty with the slides, but hopefully in the beginning of this presentation, when I asked you that to help me learn as well, you will provide some comments, you'll provide some insights, you'll agree or disagree, and you will hopefully give to me more information to help me learn going forward. Thanks very much for the time together. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate hearing from you all.
Thanks for sharing your insights with us today, Andy. Everybody, have a great day.
Bye now.